When we talk about the common mental disorders, these are the ones we probably would see in practice 90% of the time. Doesn't mean the others do not happen. It's just these are the most common ones that we see, hence the term common mental disorders. It's about generalized anxiety. It's about a major depressive episode, so situationally being depressed. It's about substance use disorder. So it's not substance dependence where you're an alcoholic. Substance use disorder is more where you can go without a drink for 2 or 3 weeks. But when you have one drink, it becomes 2, it becomes 5, becomes 10, becomes blackout or loss of memory, even if it's just situationally. And then the other thing that we see is called an adjustment disorder, which very interestingly looks a lot clinically like depression. But there's a big difference where with depression, you can't always tell the origin. So it can be biochemically driven with no particular trigger. With an adjustment disorder, very often there's quite a specific trigger that instigated the process. We usually just differentiate as well in a session by asking a client if we can pin the origin and remove it, will the feeling go away in the next 5 to 6 months? And if the answer is yes, chances are that it's probably more in the space of an adjustment disorder. But with that said, although we see this quite a lot, you see these conditions that might be a little bit subclinical. So it's not a clinical condition yet, but it's more than just having a bad day. Now, this is where people like to use words quite interchangeably. So we use words like depression, anxiety, burnout, stress, like it means the same thing. And it's fine from a linguistic perspective if you want to use it like that. But there's technically an interesting difference between stress, burnout, anxiety, and depression. And I think it's important to distinguish, to decide what the next steps would be and how you deal with it. So when we talk about stress per definition, usually stress has got a very particular starting point. It's a single stressor or strain, usually by demanding circumstances, but unfortunately doesn't always have a clear outcome. The problem we have in life, however, is we don't have single stresses. We've got concurrent running streams of stresses. And sometimes before the first batch of stresses will resolve itself, the next batch will begin. So you have these overlapping layers of stress going on, which eventually, if you can't deal with them effectively, if you can't de-stress, have good recovery in place, this is where it leads to something called mental and physical exhaustion, which is where burnout comes into play. So burnout is the mental exhaustion you get when you're exposed to stress for too long, too severely, too intensely. Now, technically, burnout is not a psychiatric disorder just yet. I know the World Health Organization does already accept it as a diagnosis, but it will probably only be included in the next DSM once the new version is coming out. We still treat it as such because there are particular things we can do, but quite important to understand the difference. Once you hit the space of burnout, we see symptoms happening mentally, physically, psychologically. So it can be feeling quite tired or have physiological symptoms. It might be mental symptoms, just in terms of how your mind processes information, or behaviorally, where you eventually start changing the behavior, avoid certain people, situations, so people can see you are veering from the baseline. That again is different to anxiety, where the pure definition is about this excessive worry or nervousness with this imminent fear of something going wrong. So when anxiety happens, we see significant changes in similar categories, but it's to the extent where it has a much stronger emphasized influence on things like your social functioning, work functioning, and personal functioning. So usually symptoms like agitation, excessive nervousness, changes in sleeping patterns, eating patterns, just this series of different things that you worry about. It's usually not confined to one category. So it's not just worrying about work, that's work stress. But if it's work and life and social and family and finance, once it starts taking on different various areas, we start moving into the space of generalized anxiety. Now, for it to be classified as a disorder, you technically need to have these symptoms most times of the day, most days of the week for up to 6 months. Now, I'm not saying wait that long before you ask for help, but this is how long it takes technically before you can clinically diagnose this. Where if you look at something like depression, for example, where the definition will shift from the excessive worry or nervousness or anxiety to the mood dropping, although there are some interesting overlaps in symptoms, changes in appetite, the main thing here is loss of energy, specifically feeling negative, a bleak outlook on the future, a very negative views about the self, a very negative views about people and their ability to understand what you're going through. But what's really interesting with these changes in appetite, in energy, in mood, in outlook on life, You only need these symptoms most times of the day, most days of the week, for as little as 2 weeks before it becomes diagnosable. So you can see our capacity for dealing with stress appears to be significantly longer, up to 6 months before it's diagnosable, where with a major depressive episode or major depressive disorder single episode, this is as little as 2 weeks. So the idea is to have a high level of vigilance and awareness. So when these things start happening, don't wait too long to ask for help. The sooner you can catch this, the easier it is to deal with it. There are some great tools out there you can use to do screening. Please do not self-assess. But if you are concerned about yourself, contact a professional, make an appointment, and just don't suffer through this in silence. A big part of resilience is the ability to know when to ask for help. If you need more information about this, please feel free to contact us on the website or the phone number you'll see on the screen below. Otherwise, also leave a comment in the comment section, and where possible, I'll gladly try and answer that. Please join us again next time discussing things health and human performance related. Thank you very much.